Hello and welcome to the Food Policy, Regulatory Framework, and Strategic Risk Management study unit. This submodule would be on food policy awareness. So this practical module introduces learners to the distinction between mandatory regulatory requirements and voluntary best practices in food sustainability management. Through applied case analysis and contextual reflection, students will explore how legal compliance forms the foundation of responsible operations, while best practices drive innovation, efficiency, and competitive advantage. The learning outcome from this submodule is to compare best practices. Learners will be able to compare best practices and regulatory requirements to achieve sustainable goals. You'll also be able to distinguish between regulatory requirements and voluntary sustainability best practices in food operations. You'll also be able to identify what food businesses are legally obligated to implement versus what they adopt strategically to improve performance. You will be able to analyze real world case examples to compare compliance measures with enhanced sustainability initiatives. You will additionally apply the regulation versus best practice framework to your own kitchen, workplace, or household context. So we will start with a practical exercise. This practical exercise is a case study on Urban Eats Cafe. Urban Eats Cafe is a small food service business operating in the European Union. The cafe separates organic and plastic waste, follows hygiene and temperature control rules, keeps supplier invoices, it does not measure food waste, and it does not donate surplus food. Uses standard and the cafe uses standard plastic takeaway containers as well. So the EU regulations require waste separation, safe food handling with according to HACCP standards, traceability of suppliers, and proper disposal of bio waste. So food waste measurement and donation are encouraged but not mandatory. So you will complete the comparison table below by following the step-by-step instructions. So the table is divided by area, the waste separation, HACCP hygiene, food waste measurement, food donation, and sustainable packaging. And you are to mark if it is required by law, best practice, and if Urban Eats does it. So we want to see if Urban Eats applies waste separation, if waste separation is either best practice or required by law, and so on. So you will go forth under these five areas to understand if they are required by law, if they are best practice, or if the company applies it. So first thing you want to do is identify which actions are mandatory, which are these. And the second thing you want to do is identify which actions are best practice. The third thing you want to do in the third step in the process is to compare what Urban Eats currently does. And the fourth one is to mark a gap where improvement is needed. So we want to analyze the table and also the case study itself. So I will give you a couple of minutes so we can look through what we have here. The table here. So what we want to do is come back, look at the table, and then go back again to understand what the cafe does and what the EU regulations are. Okay, so the answers to this practical exercise is that we start with the waste separation area, and we know that the waste separation is required by law, and EU and national regulations require proper separation of bio-waste and other waste streams. So waste separation, yes, is a best practice, and its effective separation improves recycling and environmental performance. Urban Eats separates organic and plastic waste, and there is no gap in compliance, but performance could still be improved. So, going further to the HACCP hygiene, HACCP hygiene is required by law. Food businesses must implement HACCP based food safety systems, and it is also a best practice, so which means strong hygiene management improves food safety and it reduces waste. The Urban Eats the Cafe follows hygiene and temperature control rules, and there is no gap identified in regards to HACCP. So food waste measurement. Food waste measurement is not required by law. In most EU countries, measurement is encouraged but not directly mandatory for small operators, meaning it's an optional thing that operators can adapt. And best practice, yes, food waste management is a best practice. Measuring waste allows prevention and cost reduction. Urban Eats does not measure food waste, so that answer would be a no. And yes, there is a gap in food waste measurement because sustainability improvement, there's a gap between sustainability improvement opportunity. Moving forward to the food donation. Food donation is not required by law. It's encouraged but not voluntary. So it is a best practice. Donation supports waste hierarchy, preparation for reuse, and Urban Eats does not donate surplus food. Yes, there is a gap and there's opportunity to improve sustainability performance as well. So, sustainable packaging is not required by law. Only food safe packaging is mandatory. So, any type of sustainable packaging that companies or organizations develop is simply out of their own will. And best practice, yes, it is a best practice. Of course, compostable or recyclable packaging reduces environmental impact largely. And Urban Eats use standard plastic containers. So I wouldn't say they use sustainable packaging because it is a plastic container, but that answer is obviously a no. And then the gap is yes, there's a gap because the environmental improvement is possible. Here we see on the completed table would look like this. And now we will move on to the next practical exercise. This exercise is for us to understand, of course, it is related to the case study, so it helps us sort of conceptualize what is going on and better understand the regulations and the awareness we have regarding food policy. So we want to give short answers to the following questions related to the previous activity. The first question is the cafe compliant with regulation? So we go back and we see if the cafe is either compliant with regulation 100% or if it is compliant with best practices. And the second question is the cafe sustainable beyond compliance? This is something also we can answer looking back at the case study. The third one is which improvement would have the biggest sustainability impact. So we want to see which gap that we have noticed that would sort of boost sustainability in the cafe. And is food waste measurement always mandatory? This is something that we can understand by looking at the EU regulations and the compliance standards. And also moving forward, the fifth question is, does compliance automatically mean sustainability? This is a yes or no question, of course. And then with adding more details to it. And the sixth one is, which comes first in the waste hierarchy, recycling or prevention? So the first question, is the cafe compliant with the regulation? Yes. The cafe complies with mandatory regulatory requirements, including waste separation, hygiene management through HACCP principles, temperature control, and supplier traceability. These measures satisfy the minimum legal obligations for food businesses operators within the EU. So this is the minimum. So basically, the cafe is doing the bare minimum by only um, adapting to the minimum legal obligations for them to operate. So the second answer to the second question is the cafe sustainable beyond compliance? No. While the cafe meets legal standards, it does not implement additional sustainability best practices such as food waste measurements, structured donation systems, or sustainable packaging solutions. Therefore, it operates at a compliance level, but not at an advanced sustainability level. Like they could change the packaging into more sustainable, environmentally friendly packaging, and they can adopt to food donation, and they can also um, have food waste management measurements so they can understand and identify where their food waste happens. The third one is which improvement would have the biggest sustainability impact? That one would be introducing systematic food waste measurements would likely have the greatest impact, as measurement enables prevention strategies, supports data driven decision making, and reduces operational costs. It also aligns directly with EU waste reduction objectives. Without measurement, targeted improvement is difficult. Is food waste measurement always mandatory? No, it's not mandatory. Um, they are directed at member states under EU legislation, and they're not mandatory for independent food operators. Um, it is also, while some national regulations may require reporting in specific sectors, small food service operators are often encouraged rather than legally required to measure waste. So it's not a legal obligation, but it is a encouragement by member states to measure food waste. And it is also considered as a best practice. And does compliance automatically mean sustainability? No, compliance means that the companies are under the bare minimum, and so it might equate to sustainability, but it's not the most sustainable that a company could be. Sustainability goes beyond compliance by incorporating voluntary improvements that reduce environmental impact, optimize resource use, and contribute to long-term systemic change. And which come first in the waste hierarchy, recycling or prevention? Prevention comes first, of course, as it is the most sustainable action, and it is the preferred approach under EU waste policy principles. Okay, now moving forward to the third exercise, we are going to practice some regulatory mapping. And the objective of this exercise is to understand what is mandatory versus what is voluntary. So we have some step by step instructions that we follow, and then we go forward. So the first step is to review the regulatory summary table that you will see moving forward. And you are to highlight mandatory versus voluntary and mark mandatory requirements in red and voluntary practices in green. Of course, this is voluntary. You could just go on by saying if it is mandatory or not. The reflection questions, and we will answer three reflection questions, which requirements are legally enforced, which practices go beyond compliance, and why might businesses hesitate to implement voluntary measures. So the third one is a bit it goes beyond what is written, and we will able to kind of understand the situation as a whole and make our assumption based on it. So this is the table. We're able to see the area, the mandatory requirement, and the recommended best practice. So the area is under food waste, suppliers, packaging, and energy. And the mandatory requirements are safe disposal, traceability required, food safety compliant, safety standards, and so on and so forth. So after reviewing the regulatory summary table, the mandatory requirements that should be marked in red are safe disposal of food waste, supplier traceability, food safe packaging compliance, energy safe standards. So energy safety standards. So these obligations are legally enforceable under EU and national legislation. So food businesses must comply with these requirements to operate legally and avoid penalties. The recommended best practices are measuring and reducing food waste, prioritizing local sourcing, using compostable packaging, installing or operating energy efficient equipment, and these practices go beyond minimum legal standards and are generally voluntary. While they may be encouraged by policy frameworks and sustainability strategies, they are not universally mandatory for all food operators. So, which requirements are legally enforced? We see that the safe disposal of food waste, supplier traceability, food safe packaging compliance, and adherence to energy safety standards are legally enforced, and these form the regulatory baseline that business must meet. So the second one is which practices go beyond compliance? Food waste measurement and reduction programs, local sourcing policies, compostable packaging adoption, and energy efficiency improvements go beyond compliance. These actions reflect proactive sustainability strategies than legal necessity. So if a company does local sourcing policies, compostable packaging adoption, and they are energy efficient, that means that they are actively, proactively sustainable instead of just doing the bare minimum that is legally required. So, why might businesses hesitate to implement voluntary measures? This is the question we want to understand going forward and to while we build our awareness on food policy. So, businesses may hesitate due to perceived higher costs, limited technical knowledge, lack of time, operational complexity, or uncertainty about return on investment. So, some they might be doubts under of all levels, and one of them could be if being sustainable is actually financially important for this company or for that organization. One of them is maybe it's operationally very complex and hard to comply to or adapt to an organization. There might be lower numbers of staff and limited resources. So, small and medium sized enterprises may prioritize immediate regulatory compliance by doing the bare minimum and what is legally required than going over the board and doing sustainable other and undertaking other sustainable practices. So that is it for this submodule. I hope this has been very informative and it has increased your awareness on food policy.